What's going on, guys? I'm Tim Kelly. He's Anthony Sanfilippo. This is Phillies Stoplight on Patterson. The Phillies have to settle for 2 out of 3 against the Nationals, and really there's some interesting storylines that come out of this series. And the biggest to me, Ranger Suárez is coming back Sunday. We'll get to the Diamondbacks preview in a second, but there is a counter effect, I guess, of Ranger Suárez coming back. It's that someone else is going to have to go off. So it's really the first roster crunch of the season, which, considering you're in May, that's not a bad place to be, but you are going to have to make a decision on who goes off the 26-man roster. And I think a couple weeks ago it was fairly obvious it would be Carlos Hernandez. I don't think it's fairly obvious anymore.
No, it's not. And I know fans are going to be disappointed that the Phillies lost this game 4-2. But when you really look at it, I mean, who are the possibilities that could come out of here? You could move on from Taijuan Walker, but why would you?
Yeah, and based off what they're said, they're not moving on.
Right, and he's pitched really, really well. He pitched really well again tonight, and I know it's surprising to everyone, but I mean, he's done a heck of a job. So he's going to keep his spot. Hernandez has started to throw strikes, and Rob Thompson talked about him a little bit last night after the win yesterday, and talked about how he's got an aptitude, is the word that he used, an aptitude for picking up on how to fill the zone. And now that he's starting to throw strikes and get success with his 97-mile-per-hour fastball, plays very well. So I don't think that they're going to want to move on from him. So what does that really leave? That leaves Jose Ruiz, who's out of options, but he had a good inning yesterday.
Well, and Rob Thompson loves Jose Ruiz. So for that alone, I don't even necessarily consider him a candidate, honestly.
If we all had somebody who loved us as much as Rob Thompson loves Jose Ruiz. Tanner Banks and Orion Kerkering each have an option.
Yeah.
Kerkering came into this game tonight, faced one batter, 6 pitches, struck him out, and then they didn't bring him back the next inning. I think it was because it was a long inning. We didn't really get to ask Rob about that after the game. But he has struggled of late, so it makes you wonder, do they use one of his options to try and get him right in the minors? If not, I think Tanner Banks is the guy, and it might be one of those situations, Tim, where he just happens to be the guy who has the option, even though he's pitched well.
I mean, it's
that goes down.
A lot of what Cody Clemens went through the last few seasons, where you're just unfortunate you have options. He's a great guy. He's kind of replaced that Garrett Stubbs type presence in the clubhouse. Like, guys like him. He's funny. He'll talk to anybody that walks by him. And he pitched he had arguably the best performance of his career a couple nights ago. That's why I struggle with the whole thing. But I look at this bullpen and I feel like Carlos Hernandez throws a 97-mile-an-hour fastball. You're a team that needs right-handed pitching. He has as high a ceiling as maybe anybody other than Orion Kerkering. I would still put the highest ceiling. The thing I struggle with Kerkering on is 2 weeks ago, you felt like he was one of the 3 guys in the bullpen you trusted. It feels a little rash to me to send him down. And had he come out tonight and really struggled, maybe it's different. And perhaps he will Friday or Saturday, and that will make the decision. The flip side of that is Carlos Hernandez, after Rob Thompson talked about the aptitude and talked about how much he's grown, comes out tonight, clean inning, gave up a hit, but only 12 pitches, 10 of them were for strikes. I mean, he is doing exactly what the Phillies want, and I just feel like he's somebody, if you've already started to see, it's working, what the pitching coaches are having him do is working, you don't want to give up, because most likely in my mind, if you DFA him, he's getting claimed and he's gone. And it's not the end of the world. We have these debates all the time and then never think twice about the player after they're gone. But he's someone, to me, that the upside is high enough. Frankly, if it was down to me, I'd probably keep him over Jose Ruiz.
Yeah, you're probably right, but I do think that they'll opt to keep all of them and send somebody down with an option. But the one thing I will say, and I agree with you that it would be rash to move Kerkering down, but it's just as a quick reminder, think back to 2022 when Jose Alvarado was in a very similar place at the beginning of the season and struggled mightily. They sent him down. He was down for 3 weeks, brought him back, and he was arguably their best reliever.
It's already the best reliever in baseball the rest of that season.
Yeah.
So I think if Kerkering were to go down, which I'm still hesitant on whether that they would actually pull the trigger on that, has 3 options, so no concerns there. But you have to send him back down there with a plan, both for what you're telling him and what you're telling the media and public and everybody, that it's not just you're sending him down because he's struggling. You're sending him down because you want him to add a third pitch, something like that. You expect him to be back in a couple weeks. There's a possibility of a phantom injury or an actual injury, who knows, but It's an interesting situation, and I felt like watching Carlos Hernandez pitch tonight, like maybe he's not pitching for his job in the sense that if he's pitching well, it assures him he's going to be here Sunday. But if he had laid an egg, that maybe makes a decision. So I think you have 2 more games, and ultimately you're going to have to decide based off of those 2 games what way to go. And you're probably not going to be particularly comfortable with any of the options. So that's why Dave Dombrowski has had so much success and gets paid well and all that to make tough decisions like this.
It's a good problem to have.
It is.
Ultimately, it really is a good problem to have. If you have one too many good players that you want to keep and you need to move somebody out, it's a good problem for your organization to be in.
And teams love organizational depth, though, which is what kind of piques my interest, specifically when you hear Rob Thompson talk so highly last night about Carlos Hernandez. So we shall see. Another guy in the bullpen, potentially in the bullpen later in the season, Ranger Suárez is going to make his start Sunday. I don't think there's ever really any consideration of putting him in the bullpen right now. But I also don't think it's some insane talk radio caller conspiracy that maybe at some point this season you'll want to put him in the starting rotation. And I want to read a quote. He gave this to the translator, but he said, when asked about what he would think if the Phillies asked him about going in the bullpen at some point this season, he said, obviously it's going to depend on the context. That's a tough one. I obviously want to be in the starting rotation all the time. I want to be a starter. But if it's for the team's sake, if it's to win something, if it's to get to the World Series, then I'm willing to do anything. So I will say he paused before he gave this quote. Dave Uram from KYW News Radio tweeted out the quote, and it's tweeted out the video, and it's one of those ones you maybe get a different perspective. So he didn't slam the door shut. Like, I think if you had asked Zach Wheeler that question, it would have been like, of course not. And of course, Zach Wheeler should have that perspective. With Ranger Suárez, it's a little different because he's had the success there, and frankly, coming back into the rotation right now, he's your 3 or 4 starter right now.
Of course he wants to be a starter. He's a free agent at the end of the season. Starters make more money than relievers. So, of course, he wants to be a starter, right? And I think every pitcher, in a sense, at some point in their career wants to be a starter until they find success out of the bullpen, and then in which case they might say, oh, well, I really enjoy this role as a closer or as a setup guy, whatever the case might be. The point is that I think what Ranger was saying, and it makes a lot more sense, Tim, is in a lot of ways what the Phillies did, again, going back to 22, what they did with Zach Eflin, right? And Zach Eflin was a starter who they moved to the bullpen and actually used him as a closer for a little bit. And then Zach Eflin went out as a free agent and got a good contract with the Tampa Bay Rays before being traded. And so, Ranger Suárez can still get a good contract if he moves to the bullpen in, say, September.
Right.
And I think that ultimately you're probably looking at a situation where it's like, hey, he's going to be in the rotation for now. We'll see how things go. If everybody stays healthy, when Andrew Painter's ready, then we have to make another decision. We'll figure out what that decision is then. But odds are not everybody's going to be healthy all year long, right? Somebody's going to get hurt, unfortunately. And to have this depth is actually a good thing for the Phillies.
Well, and I think it gives them the possibility. Last year, you had to make what I think was an uncomfortable trade for Carlos Estevez, and you got okay results from him. You gave up 2 of your top 10 prospects, and who knows how they pan out, Clausen and Arrighetti.
No, Aldeguerri. Arrighetti's in Houston.
I'm not Italian, so but who knows how they pan out, but that's a hefty price to pay to have a guy for 2.5 months on your team. So I think part of the thinking when you acquired Jesus Luzardo was maybe 1 or even 2 of these guys come playoff time. If your rotation ends up, let's say, Wheeler, Sanchez, Luzardo, and maybe Nola, then maybe you have Painter and Suárez out of the bullpen, and all of a sudden you look up in the postseason and a bullpen that in April, for much of April, looked bad, is maybe even a strength. And you can do that without having given up prospect capital. So I think the biggest issue for Ranger Suárez getting paid is teams are going to be scared off by that injury history. And even if he pitches the rest of the season with no hiccups, it's going to be tough, specifically if he's got a qualifying offer attached to him, for him to get what he wants this offseason. I think he is someone that is not going to make out as well as I mean, a year ago, I thought this is somebody that's getting a $150 million contract. I don't see that in the cards for him. He gets it. I mean, God bless, good for him. He's a really good pitcher when he's out there. He's fun to watch, but I think you're right. It would be borderline wrong, I think, for the Phillies. It would be doing wrong by a guy that's been a really good pitcher for you to put him in the bullpen right now. But if you go to him in September and have that conversation, I think it's a fair conversation to have.
I think you're right. And one little note, I did a story about this a couple weeks ago. It's worth pointing out that in each of the past 3 seasons the Phillies have made the postseason, that their bullpen in April, less than half of the guys that were on their roster and pitched out of the bullpen in the month of April ended up pitching for them out of the bullpen in October. So they overhauled their bullpen each of the last 3 seasons. It's probably going to be a similar thing this time around as well.
And maybe in this scenario, though, you don't have to trade prospect capital. I mean,
Correct.
you saw Ben Brown pitch against the Phillies. I think that was a fair trade. They made it to the World Series. David Robertson was a big piece for them, but Ben Brown is now a young starter that you had to give up for a few months of 37-year-old David Robertson. So relief pitchers, even if it's not Ryan Helsley, are going to cost quite a bit, even as rentals. So it's something to consider. Finally, Phillies-Diamondbacks this weekend. In a way, I think they're catching them at a good time. You're without A.J. Puck, Justin Martinez, who were their top 2 relievers probably entering this season. Merrill Kelly, who's going to pitch in Game 1, has not pitched particularly well so far. Brandon Pfaadt, Game 2, don't need to tell Phillies fans about him. He's having the best season of his career to this point. But then Eduardo Rodriguez, who at times has been a really good number 2 or number 3 starter, hasn't worked out so far with the Diamondbacks. So you're catching them at a relatively good time in a pitching sense. The flip side of that, though, is Eugenio Suárez has hit home runs about as well as anybody so far. Corbin Carroll, whatever sophomore slump he had the first half of last season, it's gone. He's arguably a top 5 player in baseball right now. And Geraldo Perdomo, who was always a good defender, has taken a step forward offensively this year and is just kind of one of those guys that it feels like he adds something to the game whenever he's involved.
Yeah, and I think you're right, though, Tim. The one thing about the Phillies is every time that you're going to match up against another team, even if it's a good team like the Diamondbacks, who are a good team, you're always going to have the starting pitching advantage. And so you look at this and you say, well, the Phillies have an advantage here in the 3 guys that are going to pitch in this series and the matchups that they're going to have. And yet, even though the Diamondbacks have a really good offense, the Phillies they're still getting on base. I mean, Trey Turner had 3 more hits tonight. And, I think a question that's probably worth asking him, and maybe I'll talk to him tomorrow about it now, is even though you're not slugging, the fact that you're getting 3 hits in a game, 4 hits in a game, 3 hits in a game, which he's done in 3 of the last 4, does that satisfy you enough, or do you feel like there's still more that you want to do and more that you try and do? Yeah. And it's kind of an interesting thing. So he's getting on base. We saw them hit 3 home runs last night, which was something that was, for Phillies fans, a pleasant thing, a sight for sore eyes is what I mean to say, because it's something they hadn't done in quite some time. But the fact that they keep getting on base, keep getting hits, yeah, they struggle with runners in scoring position and 2 outs. But they were, I think, coming into today, it might have fallen back, but they were top 10 in the league in runners in scoring position. Most people don't realize that, right? It's really the 2-out thing. So they just got to clean up being clutch, and they got to clean up defense, because defense hurt them in this game tonight. 2 mistakes that cost them 3 runs, basically. Otherwise, they might win this one. So, if they could play with a little bit more clean defense, continue to get the good pitching they're getting, and just get 1 or 2 more timely hits, I think they can win this series this weekend against the Diamondbacks.
Yeah, and I'll be following the Trey Turner stuff in terms of his offense that you were suggesting. His on-base percentage right now is higher than his slugging percentage. I didn't want to ask him about that after the game because he had a really good offensive series, and I felt coming into this year he had maybe gotten a little too home run dependent the last few years. So I think the table setting thing is good, and the home runs will probably come. It is an interesting question in terms of, are you satisfied with this? But so far, he's hitting close to 300. He's got a really high on-base percentage. They need more guys to drive the ball other than Kyle Schwarber. And Max Kepler's done that a little bit, but Bryce Harper's gotten cold. So obviously, it goes without saying, they need significantly more from Alec Boehm offensively, especially in terms of extra base hits. But yeah, lots of interesting stuff. This has kind of been a perfect first month from a media perspective because they've played well. People are interested, but if you want to find things to pick at, you can definitely find things to pick at.
But you know what? The media, as always, we're like a bunch of crows, right? Hovering around our prey. And we're going to go get that roadkill and we're going to pick it apart no matter what after every loss. And that's what we do.
All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Phillies Stoplight. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time.